Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Theophilus here, and I'd like to share about my recent experiences. I'd like to share about my recent experiences. Over the beginning of this year, I was set out to do a dopamine detox. Now, I wanted to see if I could do the entire month while staying completely faithful to it. I went about a week, staying relatively faithful to it, and I got a lot of mental clarity from it. That's what a lot of this video I want to focus on, is mental clarity. Now, if you're not familiar, if you're not up to date with some of my recent videos, I've shared about my new Substack. I have a Substack account now, which is basically a little app where people can write, they can type or blog, and other people can view each other's content. And I wrote a pretty in-depth little writing on it, So, what is wrong with a lot of our thinking? I'll put it this way, right? Growing up, I had a lot of brain fog, and I know I may have talked about this before, but I had a lot of brain fog. And sometimes I thought I was a little slow or something like that, because sometimes when things were very obvious, the dots would not connect in my brain for things that were very, very simple. And it turns out it wasn't the case, because it turns out I could be pretty intelligent at times, but the way my brain had learned to think was not in a very critical way. In other words, I was not used to critically thinking and figuring out problems and problem solving consistently. And this affected me for years, and I didn't really understand. I had a lot of brain fog, and I was used to practicing what's called escapism, which is when your brain tries to find a way to cope with a circumstance by immersing yourself in a different reality or something like that. So think of video games, right? Imagine you come home from a hard day of work. You're stressed, you're tired, you're upset, you're sad, and then you turn on your PlayStation or whatever console you have, and you just play video games, let your mind kind of numb itself for a few hours, and then you go to sleep. I used to do things like this from a very young age, even from a few months old. I would be sitting in front of the television screen for hours a day. My mind had learned how to practice escapism rather than just dealing with my present reality. And this affected me in a lot of ways, right? I was somewhat academically gifted, namely in math and science, right? So I could solve the math equation pretty easily. But when it came to critical thinking, or it came to creative writing, for example, right? If I had an essay with a question that was a prompt, my mind would struggle to come up with ideas, and I would just basically say something generic that I thought was the right answer. And I had not learned how to critically think and to problem solve by myself. And that was a problem. It's arguable if I had low testosterone as a boy. I think that's very possible. Things like decision-making skills, leadership, competition, things that boys naturally kind of have and want to have and kind of grow into as they develop and become young men. I just didn't really have those things. I was kind of nerdy. I spent a lot of time playing games and stuff like that. I loved cartoons and stuff. And I did play sports sometimes, but I never had much of a competitive edge. I didn't really care for competition. I didn't care to I wanted to push myself and be better, but I wasn't motivated or driven to. I would do it, but I didn't feel like a drive or like a passion to do it as often as I would like. Even like games I play, I wouldn't even play like the challenging games. I would just play things that were very easy and mind numbing, you know. I wanted things always to be easy, and I disliked challenge. Or not that I completely disliked it, I just didn't see like the point in challenge, if that makes sense. But I was somewhat intellectual, you know, so say like math and science. I wouldn't study. I wouldn't even do my homework sometimes. I would just try to grasp whatever was being taught. And if I got it quickly, then I would do it and I'd do the test or the assignment. But if I couldn't do it, I would just give up. And it really wasn't good. Decision making, risk taking, problem solving, competition. I know I'm repeating myself, but these things I just never developed into, and I didn't know why. It's arguable that I had low testosterone, which is very possible, but I believe also because of escapism and not learning how to think critically and problem solve. So I was set, you know, because people use there's the whole thing where people say no nut November, where they stop like trying to like watch pornography for a month. But I came up with this phrase, Dopamine Detox December. I had never heard anyone say it, I don't think. But I came up with this idea that maybe through the month of December, I should just go on a dopamine detox. There's people like Hamza, there's people in the self development community that all talk about this. Basically, how cheap sources of dopamine, like entertainment, it really messes with your brain's ability to experience pleasure in natural things. So you kind of just go through life not being like happy, and you chase the cheap dopamine to like stimulate the mind to kind of feel something because you feel numb, and there's like a sadness or a pain or an anger deep down, and in order to not feel those feelings, you'll go to the pleasure seeking, the bad habits, the cheap dopamine. And because my mind had got so used to doing this, like as soon as I would get home, I would watch my cartoons. I'm glad my mom actually didn't allow me to play video games on the weekdays, and that was really good. That was really good for me, because if I did, there's no telling how destroyed my mind would be. I'm not saying it's the end of the world if you do either, but you get what I'm saying. So my mind became lazy, and it took me years to undo the damage that had been done. It took me a long time to figure out what has been going on with my brain, and you know, why am I so like in my head and overthinking and things like that? Like, why does this happen to me? And why things that should be like very simple, easy, like say like a yes or no answer, or like a something that would be seen as common sense, my mind just wouldn't get it. But I could do like math equations easy. You know, when I get to like ninth grade, I could do like the algebra equation. Like the dots would just click, it would just connect. But little simple things, my mind can really struggle to grasp. You know, and a lot of it, you know, things you have to learn. We all have strengths and weaknesses. There are different types of intelligence. There are different ways that our minds work. But my mind had just been lazy. I had not been used to consistently using my mind. I had not been used to consistently like focusing and problem solving to overcome the obstacles in my day to day life. I had not gotten used to doing that. And I don't believe that in the school system we're really taught this kind of critical thinking. Like we're taught some, like we're taught like some like say like a writing prompt for a test, you know? But that writing prompt for that test you do like once every like few weeks or once a month or a few times a semester. And not only that, but that prompt that you have to write for writing test, you have a limited amount of pages, you have only a short amount of time. It has to be about the specific thing that you probably don't care about, you know? And it's like all these little fine details, or these ways that you have to like conform to whatever the prompt is, you know? And my mind had not gotten used to thinking creatively from a young age. The only creative thinking I would do was like daydreaming about just being in La La Land, imagining all kinds of fantasies and things like that. That's the only creative thinking my mind would do. My mind would not creatively think about like a career pathway, about what I want to do with my life when I grow up. I didn't think about these things, didn't come to my head. So when I was 18, a counselor calls me in the office and they're like, well, hey, like you're gonna like go to college, you're gonna like do something, you gotta do something with your life, you probably should go to college. And like, okay, I'll go to college. And then what happens? People end up just getting into debt for a career that doesn't even, for a college education that does not guarantee that they will get a job. Because I don't want to go too in depth about this, but basically careers are, degrees are inflating because more people are getting them, more and more people are coming in, and the government's just throwing, like, basically giving out free loans to everyone that asks. And because of a few different things, there's like a whole job market crisis where hundreds of thousands, if not millions of, kids that get out of college can't even find a job in the career that they worked to, in the career pathway that they've chosen. It's a whole thing going on. It's an entire topic I could speak about in my own experience as well. But yeah, but basically the college education has become less valuable than ever before. The college education and the degrees have become inflated. More people are getting them, therefore they're less valuable. And not only that, but a lot of jobs you can get into without even having having a bachelor's or an associate's degree. And it makes it to where college is basically only really that helpful for specific careers, and only such a small percentile of people that get into those colleges and that finish with their degrees actually are able to get a decent paying job that is promised to the kids going into college. It's really unfortunate, but yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I had little to no idea. They make you take like courses to like select a career pathway, but I didn't care about it. Sometimes I didn't even really know much about it. I just did enough to pass. So I was just going through the motions, as many kids are. Because many kids don't really care. They're not really that passionate about these things. They're just trying to get the grade to pass so that they don't feel like a failure. And it's very unfortunate what's happening. But I don't believe that this kind of creativity is inspired in the minds of children to get them to actually think about what they want to do with their future, or even how to solve problems on a day-to-day basis. And when you go years not really learning how to do that, and then you're an adult and you're thrown out into the world and you have to fend for yourself, or you got to fight to, pay the bills and try to find your way, you start to discover that, like, you weren't really taught things that were really going to help you get out there into the world and make something of yourself. You were kind of just like left in the dark and then just thrown out there. Especially in my opinion, if you're a young man, we're like at the bottom of society. We may not want to admit this, but it's the truth. Young men that don't have their money together, that don't have their resources and finances in order, that don't have their career in order, that are not living the lives that they want, they're basically at the bottom of society. They have no skills, they have no value. And being a young man, it's hard. It's difficult nowadays, especially with the socioeconomic climate and everything that's going on. It's just really terrible, and it's really hard out here for young men. This is why a lot of men are just leaving the society, and they're going their own way. And out of all those men that are going their own way, a very small percentile are getting into things like entrepreneurship and, say, getting their body in order and getting their social life how they want it. And, I'm just one of the ones trying to make it as well. Another thing is that the way we're taught in school, specifically for boys, we don't really learn that way. I feel that men learn, we can learn through, like, of course, absorbing information that we're, say, passionate about, that we care about. We can learn through that. But when it comes to, like, making progress in life, when it comes to, say, learning how to work the 9 to 5 job and learning how to start a business, we learn the most through, like, hands-on experience, through trying and failing and repetition and trying and failing and trying and failing, and then the dots connecting in our mind until we finally get it. And a lot of times we don't really learn very hands-on in a lot of the schools. We just, like, sit at the desk and look at the teacher, and our minds could just wander and daydream, and when we don't care, you're probably not going to do that well because it's not something that you want to do. And I could get into what's going on with the boys in the school systems and the ADHD diagnosis, and how just, putting some drug inside the child system isn't going to help. It's just going to numb the symptom. It's not going to solve the problem. And we're often, when we get out of school or we get out of work, our mind just so destroyed, and we feel so sad, and there's pain and anger deep down inside, and it gets to the point where we can't even sit alone with our own thoughts. It is very unfortunate, but it really gets to that point where you can't even sit alone with your own thoughts. And then what do? We have social media. We just scroll, like TikTok. We scroll YouTube, we scroll whatever. We watch the show, we play the games. And our mind is just absorbing all this useless information that's not going to actually help us. It just dulls and numbs the feelings of pain, of sadness, of anger. It makes it to where we're not even in touch with who we are and what we want out of life. We're only in touch with what the algorithm feeds us. And it's really bad. We use dopamine like an unnatural source of caffeine to overstimulate the mind, give you access to this excess energy that you use to keep chasing pleasure. And I've thought, like, okay, how do you not do these things so much then? Like, how do you put them down? Like, I've had streaks where I can go weeks or months without them, but, like, how did my mind get to that place to where I was not doing the bad habits and I was doing the good habits much more consistently? Like, what's the difference when my mind is in that space where I'm profiting and I'm doing well, and it's not in that space and I'm just seeking pleasure and wasting time? I believe the key is properly using your mental energy, right? I've talked about what we call sexual transmutation. I've talked about channeling your energy, your anger, the pain, the sadness. Andrew Tate talks about this as well. Using all of that as fuel to be productive. You can then use all that energy that you have, the pain, the hurt, with the energy that you're not spending just at your 9 to 5 job or just doing whatever task or at school. Because, like, we often still have energy, Sometimes we may feel tired. There may be, like, a mental fatigue. But we often don't just go home and go to sleep. Sometimes we feel tired, but at the same time, like our mind is a little bit troubled. It's like your mind is a little bit disturbed, even if the body's tired. Sometimes the mind's still awake. And then what do we often do? We can then scroll social media or look at on the internet or play the games or look at the entertainment, or play around with whatever friends we have that are more than likely just friends out of convenience, not friends because you actually deeply relate to each other and you're on the same path in life. And those habits that we do, they stimulate the mind and overstimulate the mind, like kind of like caffeine, but in a much more unnatural way, to where the mind is overstimulated and it's like it's burning through all this excess energy that it has. You know, the dopamine is like it's instead of putting the mind at rest, it hyperstimulates the mind and like forces the mind to stay awake, like an unnatural, like like something like coffee but worse. And then that excess energy that you have, you then use to keep chasing pleasure because you feel miserable. And the only way I can not do those habits is if I use all that energy that I have like fuel, like a fire that burns. The phone slipped. If I use it like a fire that's gonna just burn and burn and burn and give me access to like this unlimited source of energy, we feel a lot of pain, we feel a lot of anger, there's a lot of sadness that we just keep bottled up inside, and then eventually the bubble bursts, the dam breaks, we crash out. And in order to not go that path, the only way, specifically for a man, is to learn mental toughness, mental resilience, practice a form of stoicism, which is not just numbing your emotions or pretending you don't have them. A lot of people mistake people that practice some form of stoicism or like just embracing your masculine energy as a man. People mistake that and think that it's just pretending to not have emotions. That's not the case. Scrolling TikTok, that's pretending to not have emotion. Wasting time on social media and drugs and all this other stuff, that's pretending to not have emotions. That's putting off and hushing, quieting the emotions that are just deep inside, just bubbling up inside of you. You're ignoring what's happening in your mind. People try to act like practicing some form of stoicism is doing that, but it's not actually doing that. It's learning how to use that properly. It's learning how to use your emotions properly. You should think about the things that irritate you. Not in like a not in a way where you're just like brewing hatred and anger towards people. Not in that way. Or sorry. Not in like a highly depressed way where you're just giving into depression and feeling like a victim one moment. Not in that way where you're just feeling sad and you're like listening to sad music and doing all that. No, not none of that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about thinking about the situation that you're in, staring it dead in the face, like you're looking it in the eyes. You know, look at your social circle, look at your circumstance, look at what you have to do on a day-to-day basis. Start reflecting and thinking logically at the end of your day and think, why does this make me feel this way? Why do I feel so much anger, so much hurt, so much pain, so much sadness? Don't drown out those problems, those feelings. Embrace them, acknowledge them, reflect on them. Not like directing your anger towards other people, but you could say directing your anger at your circumstance. And then with that leftover energy that you have, you channel it, you harness it, you focus it, then you direct it at developing yourself even at the end of your day, to where you can end your day developing a high income skill, getting into entrepreneurship, learning about content creation, learning something that's going to help you change your circumstance. That way you're now making progress towards changing your circumstance. And you're not just like sadly soaking in the fact that you're losing at life. This will make you unstoppable even when you have bad habits. Even if you're addicted to some terrible habit. I've had times where I feel more addicted to bad habits, and I'm using them as coping mechanisms. I've had times like that. Those times can be intense. But even when you have those times, even if you're wasting time scrolling, and then you start thinking about how much time you're wasting, don't play the victim. Don't use that to then justify spending more time, wasting more time. I'm gonna use like casual sex or pornography as a main example for young men. There's something called post-nut clarity, where when after the deed is done, you sit there and you feel like disgusted, or you feel ashamed, or you feel sad. Even that pain you feel. Don't use that to then justify just I'll just look at some YouTube now. I'll just play some video game. Don't do that. Don't use that to justify wasting more time, because then you're just gonna continue and perpetuate the cycle. This is where your masculinity comes in. Your innate masculine desire. This is where that comes in, where you feel the emotion and you don't just fully yield to the emotion. You feel the emotion and then you learn to think logically and critically in the midst of the emotion. Then you're not just working for the emotion works for you. Something Andrew Tate says as well. He talks about depression, anxiety, and these mental illnesses, which are not excuses, by the way. Depression is not an excuse. Anxiety is not an excuse. Even if you feel like you're about to crash out, just because you feel those feelings doesn't mean it's an excuse. It doesn't justify it. This is a sad thing where I disagree with the psychologists, where they say, well, it's just a mental illness and there's nothing you can do. And that justifies all your weaknesses, and then that justifies making all the terrible decisions that you make. And you justify it in your mind because of depression or anxiety or whatever mental illness diagnosis they give you. You can use depression, you can use anxiety to your advantage. The man, he says, you should cover your ears. If you're a child watching this, I'm gonna not use good language. He said, those bitches work for me. Depression, anxiety, they work for me. All of them. They work for me. That's a powerful statement that he said. That is powerful. And depression becomes your slave. Anxiety becomes your slave. You don't become a slave to it. It becomes a slave to you. And you use that pain. It's energy. The masculinity, the stoicism, the logical thinking, the stillness, the focus. You can do things like meditation, which is just focusing on your breath. I like to take cold showers. This is what I do. I get in the shower, I turn all the hot on, depending on, how hot your shower is. I turn the hot on, I'll get in, I'll let it turn hot, and then I'll bathe. I'll go ahead and bathe, wipe my face. I justify it, I'll admit, I'll justify it, because hot water does actually clean you better. And then, no matter how I feel, no matter how angry I feel, how sad I feel, how uncomfortable, unless I have a really bad cold, and then the cold water is just going to affect me a lot more, and it's going to make me runny nose and all that. I turn the hot all the way off, turn the cold all the way on. Hot all the way off, cold all the way on. And then I let the cold water hit my chest. And it's really, really uncomfortable. And people that are so against taking cold showers, like, I really don't understand it. Specifically men. I'm not saying this 'cause I'm trying to offend anyone, but why does it make you so angry that someone's trying to tell you that you should do something uncomfortable? Man, as a man, life is about discomfort. That's the unfortunate reality. Men have always been the sacrifice. Men have always been the stress bearers. Men have always been first to respond to the emergency. It was always the 18, 20-year-old kid that's going to go die in a ditch for the war no one cares about. And only his family or his war comrades will cry. That's the unfortunate reality. 80% of suicides are men. Society's not highlighting that. 90+% of workplace deaths are men. Society is not highlighting that. The unfortunate reality is that society does not care about you as a man. Not that there are not kind people, not that there are not empathetic people out there, but society as a whole does not care about you as a man. Nor does society care about your emotions and how you feel. That's the unfortunate reality. And if you can acknowledge that, then you can think, well, why do I care so much about how I feel if no one else cares? Why should I focus so much on trying to be the victim when no one's going to feel sorry for me? If no one's coming to save me, why do I give so much thought to how I feel? And then this helps me. Then I wake up, and instead of thinking about how I feel, I think about what needs to get done. Then as I do what needs to get done, I feel like a subtle, like, joy, like a subtle, like, encouragement. Like I'm overcoming, I'm doing what needs to be done. And then I feel like I respect myself. I feel like some I don't know, like some strength in my mind and in my heart. And this is how men become masculine. So they learn to do this consistently, day in and day out, regardless of how they feel. And if you're just crumbling, this is to me as well. If we're just crumbling as soon as life gets hard, how could we ever run a business? If we're just breaking down the moment something gets hard, how could we ever be a leader of other people? How? If we can't even take care of these smaller inconveniences and problems that we have to deal with, how can we even expect to make something big of ourselves if we can't face the problems that we have now head on? And that's a hard pill to swallow. It is. But yeah, at the end of the day, you can focus on teaching yourself things that are going to matter to you. Self-development content certainly helps. I'm going to go back a little bit. I mentioned cold showers. Then I let the cold water hit my chest. And as it's uncomfortable, and it's very uncomfortable, even if my body's panicking, my mind is being tricked to think like I'm going to drown or something. I don't focus so much on the feeling. I focus on my breath. I don't focus on like the fear, right, or the uncomfort. I focus on how the cold water feels, being present, and I focus on my breath. I'm talking about how it feels physically, not how my mind feels. Focus on the physical sensation, and then I focus on my breath. And as my heart rate slows, as my breathing gets better, it's less uncomfortable, and then it even becomes soothing. Then as it becomes soothing and like calming, I don't focus on my hands and my feet, because when your body's cold, it stops sending as much heat to like your hands and your feet. So my hands and my feet consistently feel cold, but the rest of my body, it starts to be kind of like soothing and relaxing. And I put it on the armpit. in the chest, and the sides, the thighs. Turn around, put it on my back, my lower back. All these like very sensitive areas of the body. I let the cold water just until it becomes soothing and relaxing. Doing that, meditating, you start 2 minutes. Do it until it doesn't feel like a long time. Do 4 minutes, 6 minutes. At my peak, I could do like 20 to 30 minutes at a time. You don't really need to do, I don't think you need to do much more than that, like 20 minutes, because then you're just like, you have other things that you need to do, As long as you're putting yourself in that focused mindset where you can then focus on doing what's important, that's all you really need to do. Journaling as well, because we have so many thoughts that we just keep bottled up that just end up going to waste. And they just end up like cycling back to our subconscious and dragging us down. We need to reflect on these things that we're thinking about. We need to, have all this emotion and all these thoughts. We need to distill it and focus it and use writing to help us critically think and sort through all these thoughts. It's kind of no wonder we're so messed up. We have all this stuff going on in our brain and we don't even acknowledge it. And once again, masculinity is not refusing to acknowledge your emotions. That's not what it is. People think like Andrew Tate's saying. That's not what he says. Look past the Bugatti, look past the supercars and all the women, and kickboxing world champion, and hear what he actually has to say. He talks about acknowledging your pain. He talks about acknowledging your sadness and the hurt and the fear. He talks about acknowledging all of that and reflecting on it, thinking about it, and channeling it and focusing it. That's how he got to where he is. How can we not do the same? Maybe all of us can't be kickboxing world champion. I kept out at 5'5". I'm not growing an inch. And that's okay. That is fine and dandy. That's okay. It is what it is. It's how God made you. So just love yourself, man. And get caught up in all this. I don't think, not that there's no good to, having some size, right? That can certainly be good, right? Your presence is important. That's important. And, specifically combat, hand-to-hand combat. Size is important. Outside of that and how people look at you, which is important, so you should focus on building your body, of course. That's something I plan to get on in the coming months. I have worked on my body, but not to make excuses, but I do work a lot and I have injuries. And I'm just choosing to prioritize that little bit of energy I have left into learning how to make money right now, until I can get to a point to where I can consistently afford to go to the gym and the membership and all that consistently, and it's not hurting my pockets, and even the personal training and all those things that I want to do. I plan to do it in the future, and I plan to document it when I do. But right now I have a good amount of work because my body's in pain and hurting already after the day. So I choose to spend the last little bit of energy I have left on doing things like this because I want to make, I want to get out of this circumstance. Not knocking it. You should do it. I should do it. But where I'm at right now is just not a priority for me. My priority is making money. But yeah, you should reflect on the things that make you unhappy. And at the end of the day, you should meditate and journal and reflect on how you feel and use all of that energy to spend the last bit of your waking hours on productivity. I did that yesterday. I was looking at Fresh and Fit. I was little side story here. I used to watch a YouTube channel called Abbott and Preach. If you know who they are, they're these black guys. I think they're based in Canada. But really really funny guys, extremely funny dudes, and they make some funny content. I'd encourage you to look at them right now. In fact, I would discourage you from looking at that, not because I dislike them as people, but because I think it's important for young men to have as few distractions as possible and to focus on things that are very productive, you know. But anyways, not to get into the whole situation, but through Ab and Preach, I found out about Fresh and Fit, and then I started watching Fresh and Fit, and I'm like, outside of the clips, like Myron smashing them, okay, like outside of the memes and Myron like saying, "Shut up, stupid bitch, get out my," it's outside of that, outside of that, you listen to the logic and the things that they say. These men have a lot of knowledge. And I wrote this about mastering these skills to make money online. It was a little YouTube message that they put. I had a guy on their podcast, and he was talking about making high income skills that are future proof, that AI won't be able to replace. Skills that you could start learning now, that in a few months you could start making some residual income, some secondary income while you work your other job until you're making enough money to not do the other job, and you can make money online and then use that money to do what you really want out of life. You got to build yourself, and it's going to take time. And building like an online YouTube audience, for me, it's taking time. I have like 120 videos, and I've only gained 1 subscriber. So it's going to take a while for me to hit the algorithm. And I want to learn how to do it. But I shouldn't just wait for that to blow up and have that be my only source of income, my only option for potential of making income. So I have my Substack account now where I write basically what I'm making in this video. I write it out, and there are people that want to read it, and I plan on making finding other sources of income other than my 9-to-5 job. But yeah, I do that. And not that I'm perfect, not that I don't ever do bad habits. I was staying faithful for about a week to my dopamine detox, and the mental clarity I got out of that was amazing. Some amazing mental clarity. Got to the point to where I have all kinds of random thoughts, like a lot of my thoughts are like music I used to listen to, and I love the music I used to listen to. I grew up listening to rap music. I kind of got into like emo rap. You could skip this part of the video if you want, but I kind of started getting into like what they call emo rap and emo music. I also like pop music and rap music, and I like bars and punchlines and lyrics, and I like all those things, and it's very entertaining, And in the future, if I get some money and say I start getting back into like the dating scene, then I'll get back into listening to the music that I like and things like that. But right now, that's not a priority for me. And it's good to be able to just shut out all those thoughts, just shut them all out. Sorry. Now I was in such a meditative mindset that I could have all those thoughts, and while I'm having those thoughts, it's like I could just cut them off. Like I could just, sorry. I could just cut the thoughts off. I could just like hush them, like instantly. And it's powerful. And I could spend a lot of time critically thinking. I could spend a lot of time focusing and orchestrating ideas and thinking about my situation and thinking about how I can get out of this situation and what to do. And it's really helping me. It's still helping me now. Even though I'm not staying as faithful, it's still helping me. I'm still like going off that steam, you could say, that energy. And I'm not saying I plan to just be doing like loads of bad habits every day. No, I don't plan to do that. But I'm still staying on track is the important thing. Bad habits aren't even that much of a problem. if you're staying focused, not to justify the bad habits, but if you just do a bad habit and then you get back to work, it's going to affect you a lot less than if you do a bad habit and you start moping around. And I can do that. I can do that. But you know what I said today? Well, no work. Spend a little time studying, taking care of practical needs. A few hours go by, start doing things around the house. I'm like, oh man, I did spend a lot of time today. Thinking, why not make a video? Why not? I've been doing all this typing. Why not make a video? See what I'm saying? Now here I am, 45 minutes in, still speaking, because there's so much I still have to say. But having a meditative and a focused mind, it's like, imagine your mind like a rushing river. Like a rushing river of all these thoughts and all these emotions and all these feelings just going on over, like a little hamster wheel, just going on over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? It's like a river. Having a focused mind, it's like a hydro plant. A hydro plant is like when a river, the power and the current of a river is used, that energy is harnessed and focused and channeled into making electricity. Having a focused mind and a meditative mind, a creative mind, it's like channeling all that energy and all that emotion and using it into a creative output. I'm telling you, start doing this and you'll see the results. You'll see the results. It's not even that hard to just put down the bad habit. It's not even that difficult. It's like a cheat code. But really, it's just being a masculine man. Really, it's just being a man and doing what men have always done. And once you start using that energy more, that mental energy, you'll find out that you have less mental energy than you actually think. And you can keep going, but when that fatigue starts to wear in and you're mentally tired, not just like drained from working your job, but like you've actually exhausted your creative mind. You've like exhausted your mind, and like I wrote 4, 5, 6, not a whole lot, but like 10 paragraphs. That's not a whole lot. It really isn't. But it took a lot of my mind to make that. I'm using that energy. It's not just scrolling. You get what I'm saying? You have less excess energy to burn. I don't know if I'm doing little edits here and there, but there's been like some yawning. I feel some tiredness settling in because I've been doing some work. I've been using my energy, and I haven't been like moving around or exercising, but I've been focusing my energy into learning, writing, thinking. You get what I'm saying? So I plan to keep going today, and I hope this has helped you. That's all so far. I'd like to know of any ideas of anything you want me to talk about in the future. I will see you on the next one.